Courtney Wheelton is from the Tahltan, I hope I said that right, nation based in Telegraph Creek, British Columbia. She was born and raised in Whitehorse, Yukon, and has family ties to the Kwanlin First Nation. She comes from the Wolf Clan and is a member of the Etzinli family. Her Tahltan name is Begay Yale. She's going to say it. It's always a tricky thing about being an MC, you know? As the project manager of First Nations initiatives at the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate, Courtney is responsible for the coordination and management of a variety of health and education-focused projects and systems. She oversees the implementation and delivery of Jordan's principal nutritional program across the territory and functions as the hub for a variety of initiatives, administering the implementation and ongoing management of a coordinated system for culturally responsive Indigenous learner support. Courtney has a passion for her culture, her family, and whether it's going to her family's fish camp in Tahltan territory to fish for salmon every summer, picking cranberries in the fall, or tanning moose hides under the guidance of traditional teachings. So without further ado, Courtney Wheelton.
Hi, everyone. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Oh, okay, great. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me here today. It's an honor to be on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis and to be in this room with you all. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Courtney Wheelton. I'm the Product Manager of First Nations Initiatives for YFNED, the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate. Member of the Tahltan Nation from northern BC, but I was born and raised in Whitehorse, Yukon, on the traditional territory of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Tahan Quachin Council. It's really nice to be here with you guys today. So before I start talking about YFNED and our programs, I wanted to share a bit about our home. My colleague Amelia and I traveled here to be with you from Whitehorse. We got in last night. It was a very early morning, but we made it. So yeah, this is the Yukon. For some context, the total population is approximately 44,000. The majority of the population, about 32,000, live in Whitehorse, the capital city. The remainder of the population is spread across 15 rural communities. We have 14 First Nation governments, 8 Indigenous languages, and just under 2,000 Indigenous children in the public school system. So our territory is diverse, and we're spread across really the whole north. So I work for the Yukon First Nation Education Directorate. We are a not-for-profit organization that is steered by the Chiefs Committee on Education. We launched right in the middle of the pandemic, summer of 2020, in response to the long overdue need for unified control over First Nation education. We're dedicated to capacity building, systems and resource development, second-level education programs and service enhancement, and supporting Indigenous learners. Here is a recent team photo that we took on Truth and Reconciliation Day at our Healing Totem Pole in downtown Whitehorse. So we do what we do because we want our students to excel in both worlds. We want them to be lifelong learners, to know and practice their traditional laws, values, and morals, and to make sure that these teachings play an important role in their education. At YFNED, our children are at the center. Every decision we make is for our children. We've grown fast as an organization, starting with under 20 employees in the summer of 2020. We're now at over 100. We're so grateful that our community has joined us in the work that we do. We have a strong team of junior advocates, so teenagers and young adults who, in the middle of the pandemic, really just knocked on our door and wanted to be part of the work that we're in. So here we have Brooklyn with us, and she joins a lot of our programs. Similarly, we also have been honored to have a strong team of knowledge keepers, cultural practitioners, and elders who support our vision and show up every day for our Indigenous students. And there's Russell there as well with Brooklyn. So what do we do? At YFNED, we're very proud of our wraparound service model. We believe that we need to work together to create change for our children. They should always be at the center. As you can see here is our wraparound model, and I'll talk a little bit about each program. So the first is our First Nation Education Advocates. They're a group of individuals dedicated to increasing a sense of belonging, self-respect, and pride for all Indigenous students. They work primarily in the Whitehorse area, and they work to promote awareness and knowledge of Indigenous cultures, to provide support, guidance, and advocacy, to deliver culturally inclusive programming, to improve academic achievement, to connect Indigenous students with needed services and supports, and to provide safe, welcoming, culturally appropriate spaces for our students to learn. Here's a group after a summer programming. I'm not sure if they just got back or were just going on a harvesting trip. And you can see it's a good group of students, and they're all having a lot of fun, which is always very important. Here they are, scouting about. And then here's a hide tanning camp that was hosted most recently, I believe in September. You can see we have our advocates, students, and elders all working together. The next program is our Mobile Therapeutic Unit. So this is a holistic allied health service. It's a two-pronged approach, marrying the work of health professionals and wellness experts. This team works primarily in the rural communities and works very closely with each Yukon First Nation to ensure that services reflect the distinct culture of each nation. We believe that families and communities know what's best for their children, and that children are served best when we all work together. On this team, we have 2 occupational therapists, 3 speech and language pathologists, 2 counselors, 4 wellness and engagement workers, a contracted educational psychologist, and a contracted vision screening specialist. One of the activities that they've been doing across the Yukon is these murals. So our wellness and engagement workers will travel to the community. They spend a couple weeks there. They work with the students, and they design and paint a mural. This one is in Mayo, and I believe it's on the side of the grocery store. Horse therapy, equine therapy, is a project that the MTU has been doing. Here we have a young student with the horse that she's bonded through the summer program with. And they get to just spend time with communities. They spend a lot of time on the road. They're not really often in the office or in Whitehorse. They get to do fun things and support our students across the territory. The next program is Early Years. So Early Years supports parents and caregivers as they welcome a new baby and honor them as their children's first teachers. Through a family visiting model, the program promotes early learning skills, bonding, and playing together. Our Early Years department is a collaboration between the Martin Family Initiative and YFNED. It's our newest program. They just are celebrating their first year anniversary on Saturday, so they're having a big party. And it's currently operating in Whitehorse as well as in 5 rural communities. There's Alana and her little one. And the nutrition program, which is why I'm here to talk with you today. So our nutrition program provides equitable and healthy food to all Indigenous children aged 0 to 18 in the Yukon. It's a 2-pronged approach, focusing on a rural stream and an urban stream, which are separate programs but are closely interconnected. The nutrition program also promotes healthy traditional food practices such as seasonal harvesting, food preservation, and meal preparation. Before I get into our nutrition program, I want to acknowledge Jordan River Anderson. All 4 of YFNED's wraparound services are funded by Jordan's principal. Jordan's principle aims to make sure First Nations children can access public services in a way that is reflective of their distinct cultural needs. It takes full account of historical disadvantages linked to colonialization, and it's based on the legal principle of substantive equality, which simply means giving a little extra help when it's needed. The change that YFNED is making is the legacy of Jordan River Anderson. Without Jordan, without Dr. Cindy Blackstock, and without the implementation of Jordan's principle, our wraparound services wouldn't exist. We owe everything we do to Jordan, to his family, and we keep him close in all of our programs. So, our rural nutrition program. What is our program and how did it come to be? I want to start that by adding that this story comes before my time at YFNED, but it's quite a well-known story in our organization and one that we share frequently. So it all began on January 26, 2016, in a landmark ruling where the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruled that Canada's definition of Jordan's principle was discriminatory and ordered that the federal government take immediate measures to implement the full and proper scope of Jordan's legacy. From there, the Council of Yukon First Nations, which is a political advocacy organization in the Yukon and our sister organization, became a service coordinator for Jordan's principle. The chiefs and leadership from across the Yukon gathered and began to discuss how Jordan's principle could be implemented to better the lives of our children. In 2016, Reg McGinty was working as a community education liaison coordinator at J.V. Clark School in Mayo, Yukon, which is the traditional territory of the Natchez First Nation. Also shout out, because Reg is my cousin, I'm very proud of him. Reg couldn't get kids to come to school, and he knew that one of the barriers was food. So he proposed a school-based nutrition program that would provide breakfasts and lunches for Indigenous students. CYFN worked with Reg, the community, and the nation, and submitted a request to Jordan's principle, and it was approved. Attendance at J.V. Clark School almost immediately increased, and with the increased attendance was increased student engagement. The success story was brought to the Yukon First Nation Education Commission and the Yukon First Nation Health Commission. Other communities were having similar struggles and wanted to replicate the success of Natchez First Nation nutrition program in their community. The Ross River Denna Council went next and submitted a request to Jordan's principle for a nutrition program in their community. But it was denied. So this is where we pulled in the big guns. Throughout the early year of Jordan's principle and the implementations, CYFN was in constant contact with Dr. Cindy Blackstock. We told her what happened and how the request was denied, and being the amazing champion that she was, or that she is, she offered us her legal team. The legal team began to prepare an appeal, but they did it for all 11 remaining First Nation governments in the Yukon. Submitting a group request for all the Indigenous students in rural Yukon was more sustainable than submitting requests for each individual nation. Working with CYFN, an appeal was prepared. They worked with each rural Yukon First Nation and worked out how many Indigenous children between the ages of 0 and 18 lived in each community, how much food would cost, how much freight would cost, because we live in the north, and the Yukon is very expensive, and how much staffing would cost. In doing so, the overall strength of the program was increased. It was easily shown how much good this program was bringing in Mayo and how important it is to have good food easily accessible in the north. They had a successful model. What was working in Mayo was working, and they had increased attendance, increased engagement. We were able to show a success story and multiple it. And throughout this process, Dr. Cindy Blackstock was an incredible support and a great help. Because of her and her team, the Rural Nutrition Program was approved for all 12 rural Yukon First Nations in the fall of 2018. And here's a picture of some students enjoying some salmon chowder by the fire. So, what is the Rural Nutrition Program and what does it look like now? Now, all 12 rural First Nation communities have resources to provide frequent food hampers, daily breakfasts, hot lunches, and snacks to schools and daycares, and to provide opportunities for youth to participate in traditional harvesting practices. Although CYFN submitted the original request, when YFNED began in 2020, the program was handed over to our organization. But what makes YFNED and this program unique is that while we apply for the funding under the universal umbrella, each nation receives the transfer payment agreement, and they receive total autonomy to deliver their program in a way that works best for their community. We are available to support each program, but ultimately they can implement it in the way that they see fit and that works for their kids. Each program follows the same funding equation as they're all submitted under that one umbrella. The equation is based on how many Indigenous kids they have in their community. Using this equation, resources are provided for food, freight, staffing, materials and supplies, including small-scale kitchen equipment. It's important to note here that the First Nation governments hold the program dollars through Jordan's Principle, but the programs are often run out of Yukon government schools. So we don't have a lot of, ability to tear down a kitchen and build a new one, but we can add those small-scale equipment to try to make it as efficient as possible. And partly because of COVID, communities were able to get creative with their programs. So they branched out from just school-based meals to holiday food hampers, community feasts, Meals on Wheels, and backpack programs. Our model provides $15 per Indigenous child per day for food. Across the rural communities, there are now about 25 cooks employed by the various programs. At YFNED, we employ 2 rural nutrition coordinators to help support the implementation of each program. To the right of the slide here is the total investment over the last 4 years. As you can see, it is adjusted by 2% each year for inflation. We are currently resubmitting for the next fiscal year, as one of the things that we've discovered over these last 4 years is that we need more dollars for materials and supplies, especially during COVID, with the increase of compostable containers and everything that comes with it. We blew that budget out of the water very fast. In the winter of 2020, we expanded the program and submitted a request for the urban region, so for Whitehorse. Often programs are created in Whitehorse and then duplicated in the communities. I'm not saying that this works. I don't think it actually does very often, but it's the reality of our territory. In this case, we did the opposite. The program started in the communities, and then it came to Whitehorse, it came to the city. It was easier this way. The communities have a strong connection to their First Nation government and a high percentage of Indigenous students in each of their schools. In Whitehorse, we have approximately 1,100 Indigenous students spread across 16 schools. And that has been one of our greatest implementation challenges, is having so many different programs and trying to reach all of our students. The program budget currently in Whitehorse has the capacity to hire 30 cooks. Currently, we have about 22 working for us, and they work out of 9 schools and a kitchen that we rent independently. Hiring staff is a challenge, as there's an all-time low unemployment rate in the Yukon, but we have a wonderful team. Here's Amanda and Daniel, who are very dedicated to the work that they do. Infrastructure is one of our biggest challenges. As I mentioned, we work in Yukon government buildings in the schools, so we don't have, essentially it's not our facility. And the school kitchens in the Yukon were not designed to have large-scale meal programs out of them. Similar to as Joanna was saying in the last presentation, we have a lot of big pots at each of our schools that we just try to do the best that we can. Often the kitchens in the schools are small, they're residential style. Sometimes the kitchen is just the staff room. Sometimes the kitchen has a light pink stove that no one's turned on for 20 years and they're scared of. It's a bit of a mess. Because of all of this and hiring challenges, we're not able to have cooks in all 16 Whitehorse-based schools. So we got creative. Last fall, we put an ad in the newspaper looking for local restaurants and caterers to help us. We now work consistently with 6 businesses that deliver meals to Indigenous students across the schools where we can't have cooks. It's been a really great partnership, and we're grateful that our community has stepped up and helps us feed our children. One of the first ways that we launched the urban nutrition program was in the winter of 2020 through a winter break hamper program. We partner with a local grocery store, and they help us essentially coordinate about 1,700 hampers that are sent across the territory. Each hamper has a turkey, a ham, groceries for a nice kind of winter break feast, a few smaller meals, big breakfast. We like to include some fun things, so like a gingerbread house for kids. This year we're doing a little cookbook. And they're distributed to both Whitehorse and to the communities. Last year, December 2021, we had a great team of staff and volunteers, teenagers and elders, all helping us distribute. At one point, it reached -37, and it was quite brutal. But it's a really wonderful time to connect with people, especially coming out of COVID. It was nice to have that interaction, to give people a little extra food as they go into the winter break, and to ensure that kids have access to food. We also have a summer hamper program, which we do bi-weekly for urban families. It's a mix of pre-prepared meals and fresh ingredients. We do this on a small scale, so we do about 50 on a bi-weekly cycle. We don't have the capacity to do it for all the families in the Yukon, but it's something we can do to help those families that just need a little bit more. And then during COVID, we saw a huge increase in food insecurity. So we were able to do emergency food hampers for families, just put together some ingredients, some of those staples, to get them through the challenging times. Here is one of our rural nutrition coordinators, Tamara, and one of our cooks, Glenn. When we started, it was in the middle of the COVID. It was hard to gather, pretty much near impossible. But we still wanted to provide nice meals for families. And food is so much more than just food. It's about bringing that connection, that community. So we did drive-by community feasts. So here they are preparing a meal. We put it in a little kind of silver aluminum dish, and 3 hours on a Saturday, families could come by. We'd give them a bag with a nice meal for 6 people, often kind of stuffed in some activities there for the kids, and really just encourage them to sit together and to spend that time. We are now able to do them in person, which is really exciting. We had over 300 people at our last one in September. About 160 of them were kids. So it's been really great to be able to see just the joy and just to bring people together to celebrate. As you all know, the business of food is more than just feeding people. Food is culture, food is family. As Joanna said earlier, food is sacred. Through our program, we get to support our community. We have the means to bring people together and to celebrate who we are. Here are 3 knowledge keepers, Naya, Chuck, and Roger, who helped in our programming over the summer, and we had a fish camp for the students. And yeah, it's just really nice just to see joy and to be together. So our program is funded by Jordan's Principle. So it is for Indigenous students, and we work in environments where schools could be anywhere from really 10% to 90% Indigenous students, depending on what community and depending on the numbers. But we didn't want to create a divisive system. We don't want to create a system where Indigenous kids are funneled into one room to eat and non-Indigenous kids eat separate. So we've had great partnerships in our communities. We really want to build community. We really want to hold up our people and create that sense of partnership. So we've been lucky to work with individual school administrations. They often have small dollars set aside for food programs. We've been able to partner that way. We have great suppliers in the Yukon who are realizing what we're trying to do and want to help by giving us discounts, by giving food credits to different schools. It's really making a difference, and we're able to extend our program a little bit more. And we work very closely with the Yukon Food for Learning Association They historically have provided dollars to schools to run food programs, to run snack programs, and we're able to partner with them to make sure that any student that comes to the kitchen, they'll get a meal. We're able to have that partnership so no students will go hungry. And here we had a celebration at our local cultural center on Bear Witness Day. And you can see all the teddy bears and the Jordan's Principle cake there. So in closing, thank you for having me today. It's been a pleasure to share about our program, and I really look forward to learning with you all over the next 2 days. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you so much for letting me be here.
Does anyone have questions?
I really enjoyed the note that you had made on the fact that in the case of your school food program, it was sort of a reversal of what often happens is the program started in rural communities or community-based programming and then moved urban. And I was just wondering, were there any particular challenges or just interesting things that you noted as you transitioned the program from community-based to urban-based?
Yeah, definitely. In the communities, it's often on a much smaller scale. Some schools have 6 students, and some have 200 to 300. Where in Whitehorse, we have, I think there's 5,000 students who attend school in Whitehorse. So it was really scaling up and trying to come up with a system that worked best for each school and each community. One of the really nice things about the community programs, and they're just getting back to it now, is they welcome the community. So they'll have lunch. The students, the teachers will go into often their gym or their entryway, and their parents will come. People from the community will come and have lunch. So it's really, it's a meal of celebration, and it has that, that spirit to it. That we're trying to replicate in Whitehorse, but it is harder being a much larger city. That being said, there are things that are easier in Whitehorse than in the communities. We have access to more groceries. The food has to travel not as far compared to some of the communities, so we often help our community partners by trying to get them connected with distributors that will go right there so they don't have to stop in Whitehorse. And produce never really lasts that long, so trying to get it to the communities as fast as possible. What else can I say? Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of things we can learn from each other. The communities have really great programs, and it really is about community, and it's about sharing food and sharing culture, and we're slowly getting there in Whitehorse. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you for the
Hi.
presentation. A question regarding your funding in Jordan Principle. Are you having to apply on a yearly basis for that funding, or how long is the time frame on that?
We don't have to apply on a yearly basis. We recently just went through an application process in January. So for most of our YFNED programs, we have 3 years. Right now with the rural nutrition, we are in the process of renegotiating, so we are applying and we'll apply for 2 years. Because after a few years of the program, we realized that we need to move things around. Because the equation is based on students, if you have a certain number of students, you get that many cooks. We're finding that, especially in those small communities, you just need more than one cook. Like, they need someone to help. If people are away or if people are traveling, it just means that there's no one in the school to feed the kids. So we're looking at staffing, we're looking at materials and supplies, and hoping to renegotiate those, but it is on a 2 to 3 year cycle, which isn't ideal. It would be nice to have it much longer, but it's what we've been given right now.
Are you pretty confident going forward that you'll be able to get funding from Jordan's Principal for every bout, or confident enough with the partnerships and the communities that you don't think this nutrition program will be impacted at all?
We wouldn't be able to run our program the way that we are without Jordan's Principal. The investment that they put into kids in the Yukon, specifically in nutrition, is very high, and we wouldn't be able to see those dollars in our current climate, I guess, coming from partnerships alone. That being said, we do have a level of confidence that the program will continue. I think we've been able to show the success and show how much of a difference that it makes for all of the students in the Yukon. Some of the rural programs are providing food for daycares as well. So they're really covering every child in their community from the age of 0 to 18. And to take that away, I can't even imagine really the impact that that would have. We work quite closely with the northern region of Jordan's Principal, and they have been really supportive of our program. There's definitely a lot of justification that was done, showing the cost of food of the north, how difficult it is to have nutrition programs that aren't staffed. Yeah. We're hoping it continues. We're confident, but there's always a little bit of the yeah.
There's a question in the chat here. Okay, question from the chat. Do you see the role of the What do you see as the role of the Directorate to inform the federally proposed National School Food Program?
It's a great question. I think probably everyone in this room believes the same, but we believe that having a universal food program for every student in Canada, and especially in the Yukon, would be highly valuable. Our mandate is for Indigenous students, but we will walk alongside our partners and support them in any way we can to push forward a universal food program. It's needed. Our students need food. They need to have that ability to not have that barrier and to be able to attend school, not worried about being hungry, not worried about what they're eating, and just be engaged. And at YFNED, while we're a Jordan's Principal funded program and our mandate is for Indigenous students, we will push alongside our partners and encourage and support any other food programs that come up.
I myself sort of have two questions. First one is, you mentioned at the beginning that this has had a real impact on student attendance and participation in school, so if you could just speak to that a little bit. And then the second question is there opportunities for students to participate in the cooking? Are you doing, what kind of land-based education do you have students engaging in? If you could go into some of that.
Yeah, definitely. So the student attendance, I guess, data that we have is more colloquial, like a colloquial at this time, like kind of shared from teachers, shared from parents. We're just in the process, we're a new organization, of figuring out how to track that, especially because we work in Yukon government schools. So we don't have our own school yet. In terms of YFNED, there is a new First Nations school board in the Yukon that we work closely with, but they just really started this September. So we'll see how that goes and how we can work alongside them. But yeah, so we're trying to find ways to track that data and to kind of have those statistics. But what we've heard from communities, what we've heard from parents, is that it just takes a weight off. Being able to send your kids to school, knowing that there's food, having students be more engaged, We heard recently from one of the health centers in the Yukon that the nurse there estimated before that about 70% of her time was spent doing more social work activities. And she said since the food program has come in, it's swapped. She does about 20% of social work, and the remainder is kind of like her nurse health practitioner work. So we can see it in those ways. Like it's making a difference throughout the community. And yeah, it's exciting. And then in terms of land-based programming and students helping in the kitchens, it really is dependent on the school right now for student involvement in the kitchens. In the high schools, it's much easier for us to partner with their foods program, to have students come and prepare the meals. Some schools have managed to do a program where it is accredited. So at one of the communities in the Yukon, they have high school students going and preparing meals for the elementary school, and then they get a school credit for that. It's definitely something that we're trying to expand on and make more standardized across all of the schools. We do have it more informally in the elementary schools. Often a lot of our cooks will talk about how they'll have students come in just for a couple hours and help make muffins or bring them down to different classes and just have that engagement. So that's been really nice. In terms of land-based cultural programming, this is where we really lean and work closely with our other departments. We support our First Nation education advocates and our mobile therapeutic unit in this programming. We do have cultural wellness dollars to host cultural camps, cultural activities, to do more land-based learning, and our nutrition team works closely with them to make sure that they have what they need to do these programs, and also to start teaching kids how to cook on the land and how to cook over a fire and to have that camp and that connection. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Any
other questions?
I should mention that our program, we don't have a standardized menu because it is spread across over 30 schools. So our cooks in each school have essentially the autonomy to create their menu and to work with the ingredients that they have. We do have a training program where we bring in rural cooks and urban cooks together for a week, usually about twice a year. And this is where we kind of have those discussions and give our team a chance to share with each other what's a recipe that's working really good in their school. Can it be brought to another? Definitely going to be bringing back those calzones because those were delicious today at lunch. So I think the students will really love those. But yeah, so it is really like a school-based program. Each school has really their own program, and we try to create that web to support them all. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? I think that's it for questions. I guess, thank you very much,
Awesome.
Courtney.
Thank you very
That was
much.
excellent. Everybody, round of
Thanks.
applause.
Yeah, another round of applause for Courtney there. That was awesome. What a good presentation of just like a beautiful, cohesive, whole unit. That's what we all wish for, I think.